Our anime begins with the protagonist desperately running from a horned rabbit while shouting that it probably shouldn't be tasty, realizing that the only thing he can do is run and scream, as he has no idea where he is, and wondering what kind of creature is chasing him. As soon as he asks this question, a mysterious voice emerges stating that it will assess, and a status screen appears showing the rabbit's information, asking if he wants more details. However, at that moment, the rabbit jumps toward him, being cushioned by the protagonist's backpack, who then ends up falling on top of the animal and accidentally crushing it. Elsewhere, we see an elf being instructed to head east, as something precious will appear there. While the protagonist celebrates having survived but remains confused about where he is, he takes out his phone and notices that there is no signal, starting to question whether the voice he heard is real or just a hallucination. Until, hungry, he looks at the dead rabbit and wonders if it is edible, prompting the voice to appear again to show its statistics and confirm that the meat can be consumed, leading him to store the animal in his backpack for emergencies. Intrigued, he tries to understand the voice better, points to his backpack and asks what it is, receiving the assessment response again, which surprises him. Then, he looks up at the sky and asks the same question, but the voice says, "There is nothing to assess." However, when looking at the ground, the response drastically changes to Labyrinth Devourer, level 273, leaving him extremely worried. Repeating the process and always receiving nothing when looking at the sky and the same frightening answer when looking at the ground, he realizes there may be something dangerous hidden beneath his feet. Trying to comprehend his situation, he asks to evaluate himself, seeing the name Manabi Ribike correctly, but becoming confused upon seeing species human and class assessor, as he has always been just an ordinary student and there were never any classes in his world. Then he asks who the voice is, and it replies that it is a status support but cannot provide personal information. Analyzing his skills, he realizes that he possesses several and tries to use one of them. Dramatically screaming, the wise man's eyes activate, but nothing happens, leaving him embarrassed. Then he tries to activate the tutorial but discovers it is already active. Not understanding its function, he decides to ask for the world map to locate himself. However, he is disappointed to see something that does not seem like a useful map, realizing that, while fleeing from the rabbit, he had been walking in circles, and that his sense of direction is terrible. Even so, he continues walking, straight while following the map, until after a while he finds a road, but as he approaches, he slips and falls. As he sits up, a voice announces that he has gained a new title, which, when he checks, is Castaway from Another World. However, at that moment, he hears a sound beside him and, looking over, sees a muscular dog, drooling and ready to attack. But before anything happens, a shot hits the creature in the head, bringing it down instantly. This makes the protagonist look around, and he sees an elf on a rock to whom he quickly thanks for saving him. She replies that it was no big deal, introducing herself as Emalia and asking his name, to which he responds that he is called Ribik and is completely impressed by the girl's ears. But Emalia soon asks if he came from the meadow and how he managed to escape from there. However, the protagonist continues practically hypnotized by her ears and asks if she is an elf, to which Emalia replies yes. Then he questions if this is some kind of cosplay, but she has never heard that word before, looking confused. Then she changes the subject and asks why he was at the Abyss Devourer, leaving the protagonist confused and making him ask what exactly that is, which shocks the elf that he entered such a dangerous place without even knowing what it was about. Meanwhile, in his mind, he wonders who she is, and the mysterious voice responds that it will assess her, revealing that she is a female of the elf species, which surprises him by confirming that elves really exist in that world. The shock increases even more when the voice informs him that she is 56 years old, making him incredulous that someone who looks so young could be so old. Then Emalia explains that the Abyss Devourer is a monster that camouflages itself in the meadow. It doesn't attack directly, but makes its prey lose their way until they become exhausted, so it can devour them. Shortly afterward, she hugs him, saying it's all right, since even being such a small child, he managed to escape, which leaves Ribik confused, prompting him to ask how old she thinks he is, and she replies 10, when in fact he is 16. Later that night, Emalia apologizes for confusing his age, explaining that she didn't imagine he was an adult with that appearance. Ribike discovers that in this world, people are considered adults at 15. The two then have a meal together, and Ribik thanks her for the food, while Emalia comments that the horned rabbit he brought was a great help. He then asks where exactly they are, which surprises her that he doesn't even know that, and she explains that this place is the kingdom of Abarasia. Ribike then says he came from a place called Japan, but the elf has never heard of that name, which finally makes him accept the reality and conclude that he really ended up in another world. Emalia tells him to sleep because she will take him to the city the next day and then activates a protective spell so they can rest peacefully without worrying about monsters. While she observes the boy, she thinks she has never seen clothes like his, considering him quite peculiar, and begins to suspect that the important something mentioned by the spirit might just be him, becoming curious about who he really is. Next, we see a girl named Mani waking Rabik and complaining about how absent-minded he is, telling him to drink the special from Mani to wake up. As he drinks the coffee, he compliments it, saying it's very good, causing Mani to comment that he is starting to refine his taste, to which he replies that he's almost an adult, although he hasn't grown much. While Mani and Kyuko try to cheer him up, saying that one day he will still grow, a friend jokes that because he is small and cute, he ends up doing well with older women. But Ribike denies it, saying it's just an impression. Then he remembers that summer vacation was approaching, and on the last day of school, when he tried to enter the classroom, an intense light suddenly shone, bringing him back to the present, where he picks up the phone and wonders if his friends are worried about him, but suddenly something hits his head. A clothing button from the elf, which makes him ask the voice what those green things around are, and she responds, assessing it as a barrier magic. He then sits on a stone and decides to evaluate himself again, asking what class means, causing the voice to activate level 1 dictionary and explain that it is a type of profession granted by God upon reaching adulthood. Then he asks what it means to be an evaluator, and the voice informs him that it is a rank B class, capable of identifying other people's abilities, but without combat capability, not being suitable for battles. This makes Ibik think that he is still sleepy and simply goes back to sleep. Later, Emalia wakes up and remembers having helped the boy the previous day, but also recalls that he is 16 years old and is already considered an adult in that world. Noticing that her clothing was open, she becomes embarrassed and quickly closes it. At that moment, Ibich wakes up, says good morning, and returns the button that had fallen the night before, commenting that he was startled when it hit his forehead. Then, they both start walking together towards a city called Raul. While Ibich asks how far it is, the elf explains that if they follow through the forest, they will arrive faster. But Ibich soon asks if there are no monsters around, and Amalia reassures him, saying she is with him. Then she asks if he can sense the monsters around, and he replies that it's because of his skill map Mundi, which completely shocks her when she realizes it's a rank A ability. Curious, she asks what his class is, and Ibich responds that it says Provisional Evaluator, which confuses her since he does not even know what provisional means. He then asks if this skill is really that amazing, since he can only see people, nearby monsters, and places he has already passed through. Amalia explains that any adventurer would give anything for something like that because it makes survival much easier, which makes Ibik wonder what an adventurer is, leaving the elf shocked that he doesn't even know the basics. He then tries to disguise it, saying he was joking, and mentally asks the voice to explain, and she responds that adventurers are people affiliated with the Adventurers Guild who take on missions like hunting monsters, capturing them, and collecting materials. Upon understanding better, Imalha comments that it now makes sense he was able to escape from the maze devourer. Then, looking at him with a smile, she says that he is someone without common sense, ignorant, and completely clueless, which prompts Rabik to ask if she has any friends, hitting her directly, since she really has none. But he quickly says that she does, because he is her friend, making her extremely happy. Then, Rabik opens his world map and detects something nearby, a crystal-horned rabbit, which leaves Imalha shocked again. When asked if it is different from a common rabbit, she explains that it is completely different, being extremely rare, and can be used to create a panacea or sold for about 200 gold coins. The two then head to the location, and Rabike uses his appraisal ability, identifying that the rabbit has a skill called Escape, making Imalha warn them to approach cautiously. But he explains that he also has a sensing ability, while she uses two techniques to prepare, sound cut and odor cut, which makes her compliment Rabik, saying that his skill is impressive and that many adventurer groups would want him, as he can locate even rare things. Although he says that his class is not combat-oriented, she responds that he can stay in the back while others fight. Then, somewhat awkwardly, she asks if he would like to form a party with her, but Rabike was distracted and asks her to repeat, causing her to feel embarrassed and say it was nothing, thinking it seems like she is throwing herself at him. While he imagines that she must be lonely for not having friends, she then prepares her bow, and Rabik asks where the arrows are, to which she explains that she is a spirit archer, capable of using the blessing of spirits to turn the wind into arrows. She then shoots, and a scene worthy of a movie occurs. But in the decisive moment, when the arrow almost hits the rabbit, it uses its escape ability and escapes, leaving both of them completely stunned and Imalha Depressed after exerting all her strength in the attack, Rabik then asks if there is a way to handle this ability, and she explains that when the rabbit is attacking someone, it cannot use its escape, suggesting that this could be the perfect opportunity. Rabik immediately offers to serve as a distraction, but the elf warns that it's extremely dangerous. However, Rabik says it will be fine because when she assessed the rabbit, she saw that it was extremely foolish. They then come up with a simple plan using bait to lure the monster while preparing an ambush. Rabik positions herself as the distraction, staying in the open, and, as expected, the rabbit charges ahead without a second thought, falling straight into the trap and, at that exact moment, striking hard and defeating the crystal-horned rabbit. After the victory, Rabik notices something amazing happening as she starts to level up several times at once, both in her skills and in her class, being completely surprised. While Imalha asks if he is okay, he replies that his level just increased out of nowhere, making the elf happy and saying that this achievement belongs to both of them. But in the middle of the celebration, the button on her clothing comes loose again. Next, we see a mysterious blonde man commenting that all of this was just a tutorial, while hoping that Rabik will have a happy life in this new world. Shortly after, the scene shifts to the Adventurers Guild, where a girl named Evil is registering. When informed by the receptionist that the missions are on the board beside her, she says that she already knows exactly what her first mission will be, as she intends to find a specific person. And that's how the first episode comes to an end. Rabike and Amalia finally arrive in the city of Rovel, where everything seems more bustling and filled with curious glances. Noticing that his clothes would attract a lot of attention, Amalia quickly puts a cloak over him, explaining that it would be better to avoid standing out. She then pragmatically comments that, with the money obtained from the horned rabbit, it would be a good idea to buy better clothes, along with armor and an appropriate sword for him. Curious, Rabike asks how much a gold coin is worth, but upon receiving a disapproving look from Amalia, he tries to brush it off, saying it was just a joke. Still, he turns to his support to discover the actual value, and when comparing it with his memories, finds out that a single gold coin is worth about 10,000 yen, which leaves him completely shocked and makes him understand why Amalia had been so excited about the reward. Noticing his innocence, Amalia gently touches Rabike's face and seriously warns him that in this place, he should avoid saying senseless things, as there are dangerous people who might try to take advantage of him. The two then head to the Adventurers Guild, and as soon as they enter, some adventurers start commenting. One of them provocatively says that Amalia finally managed to form a group. Another observes Rabik with suspicion, stating that he doesn't look like an adventurer, and sarcastically asks if she has started working as a babysitter. Shortly after, another group of adventurers approaches and directly asks if Rabike is the rookie. Amalia confirms without hesitation, explaining that they have just met, making it clear that despite the doubts and comments around, this was a new partnership that was just beginning. They wish the rookie good luck and leave. Then, Amalia explains that this group is known as the Silver Banner. She then takes Rabike to a receptionist and says she would like to sell a special material, requesting a private room. Duo leads them to a room where the guildmaster is already waiting. Rabik is completely shocked by his size, as the man is gigantic. Suddenly, he stands up and tears his own shirt for no apparent reason, leaving Rabik impressed by his muscles, to the point of complimenting him, saying that he is amazing, while Amalia and Duo, they find both simply despicable. The man then introduces himself as Rebik and asks if he can touch his muscles, explaining that he is small and, even training, has never been able to gain mass. At that moment, the guildmaster practically transforms into Renato Cariani and begins to pour out various training tips for Rabik. However, Amalia and Joel lose patience and go after the two, interrupting the absurd scene. Shortly after, the support voice informs that the spells Water Creation and Cold Water have been registered by the Grimorio skill. Then, Joel appears, introducing himself to Rebik as the vice master of the guild, and directly asking Amalia what she wishes to sell. Amalia then shows the horn and asks how much they would pay for it. The guildmaster offers 400 gold coins, leaving Rebik enchanted as it is double what he imagined, sure that Amalia would accept. However, at that moment, she refuses and stares at the master, asking if he is trying to make a fool of her, explaining that 3 years ago she sold a horn for 230 coins, and that the current one is 3 times larger, so it should be worth at least 800 gold coins, revealing her greedy side. The master responds that he cannot pay that amount, and increases the offer to 550. Amalia counters with 780, and an intense negotiation begins between the two, until the master claims he cannot go above 680 coins. Amalia starts pressuring him, asking if the Capital Guild wouldn't pay more, forcing the final decision, and thus they close the deal at 700 gold coins. Shortly after this, the Vice Master complains, saying that he exceeded the guild's budget and that she will deduct it from his salary, stating that it is a lesson for a muscle-headed idiot who negotiates without knowing his own limits. Meanwhile, Amalia is extremely excited, believing that after this negotiation, Rybak will want to form a group with her, but in getting too carried away, the buttons of her shirt end up bursting again. Later, Rybak is sitting at the Adventurers Guild table when the support voice informs that the tutorial has met the requirements to level up. He then asks what exactly this skill does, and the voice activates the dictionary. It is a support skill granted to those with low chances of survival, allowing them to acquire the knowledge necessary to stay alive in that world. At that moment, he realizes that he was only able to defeat the horned rabbit thanks to this help, and thanks the god of that world for receiving such a skill. However, he soon hears another voice in his mind telling him to revere. More confused, Rybak wonders whose voice that is, and it responds by claiming to be the god who is supporting him, saying that it will help him as long as it can, but warns him to be careful and not die. Soon after, the supportive voice informs him that now that the tutorial has leveled up, the support from the companion has ended, leaving Rybak confused about what that means. But at that moment, Amalia returns. Shortly after, a receptionist named Mito approaches her, saying she has received a new mission. Upon checking the message, Amalia explains to Rybak that she needs to leave the city for a while. It is a mission sent by her homeland, and she cannot refuse it. At that moment, Rybak understands that the companion mentioned by the supportive voice was Amalia herself. Then, the scene shifts to another adventurer inside a cave, looking for something but without success. She decides to search elsewhere and returns to the city. Amalia asks if Rybak will be okay alone, and he replies that she does not need to worry. Then she asks what he intends to do now, and he decides that he will try to become an adventurer, since even without having a combat class, there are still missions he can accept. Amalia then recommends that he stay at the same inn where she was, hands him a map, and tells him to look for Portania. Finally, she bids farewell, stating that they will meet again soon. Running distractedly through the city, Amalia accidentally bumps into the other adventurer and quickly asks if everything is okay. At that moment, a guard approaches questioning the situation, but Amalia replies that everything is under control and explains that she just received an urgent mission and needs to return to her homeland. Then the other adventurer asks if her destination is the land of elves, and upon receiving confirmation, says that she is also heading that way and asks to accompany her. The scene then returns to Rybak. After separating from Amalia, he ended up spending his time just sleeping. Later, he goes to the adventurer's cave and asks Jael if she knows anything about another world, but she gets shy and responds ambiguously, saying that it is outside the city. When Rybak arrives at the place, he realizes that he understood everything wrong and starts questioning why he ended up in that world. At that moment, someone knocks on his room door, and upon allowing entry, Suratania asks if he is okay, since he didn't show up for breakfast or lunch and comments that dinner is approaching. Rybak then reflects that the bunny's money won't last forever and that he needs to take a mission soon, wondering what he can do. Then the support voice displays his status, and when he questions whether it is good or bad, he receives the answer that he should not try to fight alone. The voice also reveals that he has acquired new skills called Contact and Medical Book. Curious, he asks what the Medical book is, and the explanation states that this skill allows one to completely learn any content just by reading, including advanced medical procedures. Determined, he requests to start reading, but is warned that once started, it cannot be interrupted and will take a significant amount of time. Nevertheless, he agrees, and as he gets up, a beam of light invades his mind, causing him to absorb all the knowledge. The scene then returns to the island, where it is mentioned that Rybak has no common sense, and the other adventurer jokes, asking if she has fallen in love, but Amalia denies, saying she is 40 years older. Suddenly, a servant appears calling for her, and Amalia runs to hug her, introducing her as evil and explaining that she is a traveling adventurer who travels across various lands. After a few days, the reading process of the medical book finally completes, and Rybak decides to go out to buy equipment, going to a weapon shop where he acquires his first items. He then asks the support voice if it is difficult to acquire new skills and discovers that there are several methods, depending on the skill. At another point, we see the Adventurers Guild in Alvaroso as the leader of the group, Silver Banner, is seriously injured. One of the companions explains that he faced and tied with a silver wolf, Ruby, and that the guildmaster could stop the bleeding, but Dill informs that the master is not present. Someone suggests using healing magic, but they say they have already tried and it didn't work. Seeing the situation, Rebecca realizes that if the bleeding is not contained, the man will die, and then wonders if his skill medical book can help. The support voice replies that yes, it is possible. He then asks for permission from the group members to examine the leader, and, upon receiving immediate authorization, Rebecca activates the medical book skill, quickly identifying the presence of a poison in his body, a dangerous type that prevents coagulation and makes it impossible to stop the bleeding. At that moment, the support voice informs that only 5 minutes of life remain, shocking everyone. Ribic asks how he can heal him, and the answer comes that it will be necessary to use the combination of hyper healing and perfect healing, but the total cost is 650 mana, while he only has 56. One of the members desperately asks if there is nothing that can be done, and Ribic explains that while the poison is active, there is no way to stop the bleeding. First, it is necessary to purify the body and then restore the damage. He then asks if anyone there has those abilities, but no one responds positively. With no alternative, he consults the support voice again, which suggests using the contract skill, allowing for temporary mana sharing among several people. Ribic then explains the situation, and everyone agrees without hesitation, transferring their energies to him. But even so, he is still short 170 mana. It is when Dill offers to complete the remainder, allowing him to finally reach the necessary amount. With this, Ribic casts and purifies to completely remove the poison, and then uses perfect healing to restore the leader's body, successfully completing the treatment. However, shortly after the extreme effort, he ends up fainting, and in this state, he recalls his previous life, where Sona scolds him for always acting thoughtlessly, warning that he needs to be more careful, as there won't always be someone to save him. Upon waking up, the support voice informs that the contract skill has risen from level 2 to 5, and translation from level 1 to 2. Then Joel asks how he is feeling, and Rebecca responds that he is fine, apologizing for causing trouble, but she denies it and thanks him deeply for saving her brother, Jade, which leaves Rebecca confused, as she seems to be somewhat feral while Jade is human. Then she explains that they have different mothers, and then reveals that she made them all swear to keep the incident a secret, and, when questioned, explains that users of hyperhealing and perfect healing are extremely rare, and, if this information spreads, many people would try to exploit him to make money. That's why she suggests that Rebecca join a group of adventurers to protect himself, but he declines, saying he doesn't want to cause problems for others. Then, Duo explains that there is another option, hiring bodyguards. And finally, the scene shifts to a dark setting where a werewolf, trapped in a cell next to a girl, threatens to tear apart anyone who comes close, ending the episode with this tense atmosphere. We see Hibiki going to Deb's store to hire some bodyguards. There, one of the employees, Jeratin, introduces himself and, upon seeing Hibiki, becomes extremely excited. He gets too close and starts complimenting his scent, saying he smells a delicious aroma coming from his body. Then, Jeratin takes Hibiki to the available bodyguards and asks him to choose one. However, Hibiki refuses all the ones presented. He states that he has no issues with their strength, but notices that everyone's MP is too low. Since he intends to use hyper healing, he needs someone with high MP to share energy. An employee offers to bring in other candidates, but Hibiki asks if he can go see them personally. Jaratin agrees and starts guiding him. On the way, he comments again on Hibiki's delicious aroma, saying that he exudes a scent of gold, and Hibiki feels confused about this. At that moment, his support voice analyzes his status and discovers a skill called Fortune Scent, which allows the user to sense a special aroma from people who are about to acquire great wealth soon. Hibiki doesn't understand very well, but realizes that the employee is obsessed with money. As they pass by an entrance, Hibiki shows interest, but Jaratin stops him, saying that those are the people considered unfit for work and combat for various reasons. They cannot go home and end up remaining at that location. Hibiki wonders if their reason is the same as his, and insists on going there. Jaratan starts to squirm, saying that the aroma of fortune has become even stronger, and then leads them to the location. There, Hibiki finds a wolf trapped in a cage and questions the reason. Jaratan explains that he lost control while trying to protect a girl, necessitating his containment. He also mentions that the girl possesses great magical talent, but cannot control her powers. At that moment, the wolf tells Hibiki to go away while the support voice begins to analyze him. Hibiki notices that the wolf's class field is empty. The support voice informs that the wise man's eyes detected a status manipulation. Not knowing what that means, Hibiki uses the dictionary ability and discovers that it is a rank SSS skill. Granted by a whim of God, being able to see everything with extreme precision, upon re-evaluating the statuses with this ability, the numbers increase drastically. Bick discovers that the wolf is under a restraining spell, an invisible curse that reduces its physical abilities, and realizes its true hero status. While observing the girl, he discovers that she is a sage and possesses a skill called Divine Devastation, extremely powerful, but that causes self-destruction when used by humans. It is a test granted by the gods. Hibiki questions divine intentions while noticing that both the wolf Cloud and the girl Lillian have plenty of MP. Even so, he wonders if heroes and sages can coexist with ordinary people. At that moment, the support voice informs that the emergency measured skill has leveled up. Not understanding, Hibiki consults the dictionary and discovers that it is a magic capable of removing effects that restrict or weaken the target, regardless of the cause. Hibiki then states that he wants to take those two. Upon hearing this, the seller begins to tremble with excitement, completely overwhelmed by the scent of money. Then, Hibiki takes the wolf and the little girl to a secluded spot in the forest. Claudio finds the situation strange and wonders what he intends to do. There, Hibiki in turn asserts that he would never harm Lillian, but suspiciously comments that he might need to do some things with Claudio. The wolf stays on alert, not understanding his intentions. Shortly after, Hibiki reveals that he intends to heal him, and that, for this, he will need Lillian's help. Without hesitation, she says she will do anything to help Claudio, but the wolf warns that it could be a trap. Nevertheless, Lillian interrupts him, saying that he has always been by her side and now it is her turn to give back. When Lillian asks what she needs to do, Hibiki explains that he will need a large amount of MP to perform the healing and proposes that she make a contract with him to share her energy. Lillian agrees and the contract is quickly established, transferring her MP to Hibiki. With that, he activates his medical book and uses perfect healing, fully restoring Cloud's body. Indeed, her lost members excited, Lillian runs to him and hugs him, relieved to see him well again. The wolf then deeply thanks Hibiki. Bibi asks how he is feeling, and Claude replies that his body is extremely light, almost surreal, although it is still not like it was before. Hibiki explains that this happens because he is still under the effect of a curse. Claude is shocked, as even common appraisal skills cannot detect this curse. Hibiki also reveals knowing that Lillian is a wise one, leaving the wolf even more surprised. When questioned, Rick explains that he received from God a rare skill, the eyes of the wise, capable of seeing all the truth. He then asks if he can try to remove the curse. When activating emergency measures, mysterious chains appear binding Claude. Suddenly, a huge pair of scissors emerges in the sky and cuts part of these chains. For a moment, Hibiki and Lillian think Claude has died, but soon realize that he is alive and well. However, Hibiki notices that not all the chains have been broken. A divine voice comments that this is natural, since the skill is still at level 1. Even so, Claude feels that he has regained part of his strength. He kneels before Hibiki, begging forgiveness for his previous actions. He explains that after being cursed, he lost his strength, his honor, and even his heart. Overcome with gratitude, he declares eternal loyalty and asks to perform a ritual of loyalty. Hibiki, not understanding, asks what this means. Audio explains that it is a pact where he offers his heart and his existence in exchange for serving and protecting his lord forever. Hibiki compares this to a service contract and says he sees no problem with it. At this moment, the support voice recommends combining the ritual with a formal contract, explaining that this ensures both parties fulfill the agreement. Hibiki agrees, determined to keep his promise to Claude. When activating the contract, the wolf is surprised. Then Claude acknowledges Hibiki as his lord, offering his existence and swearing to protect him with all his strength, asking him to accept his oath. Hibiki accepts and the contract is sealed. The support voice then announces that the loyalty ritual has been officially recognized by the Spirit of Light, thus formalizing a master and vassal contract between the two. Hibiki observes the mark that appears after the ritual and asks what it means. Claudia explains that it is the mark of the Spirit of Light, a proof that the loyalty ritual has been officially recognized. She then asks Rebecca to call him Cloud. From then on, Lillian, in turn, is very happy to see that the contract between them has been successfully completed. The scene then shifts to Amelia, Ivor, and the maid, who walk together. During the journey, Iva spots hot springs ahead and suggests they stop to rest. The maid immediately gets excited, commenting that it would be a great opportunity to relax her body and, especially, to contemplate two beautiful mountains. Ivor is confused by the comment, and the maid quickly corrects herself, saying she can still keep walking. Emily finds the change in attitude strange and asks why. The maid explains that she prefers to save money, but soon reveals the real reason. She does not know Ivor, and it would be risky to relax near a stranger. Marcia questions whether that is not an exaggeration, but the maid insists, saying they are not even friends, so it wouldn't make sense to act with such confidence. Upon hearing the word friends, Imaya, who has never had one before, begins to imagine what it would be like to have a true friendship. Excited by the idea, she decides that they will stop at the hot springs. Back to Rebecca, he explains that he cannot use really effective healing magic just with his own MP and that he needs their help. Claudio quickly understands the situation and states that he and Lillian can share their MP whenever needed. They both agree to help him. Rebecca then activates the sharing ability, and the support voice informs that the Grimorio skill has leveled up. Claudio comments that he had noticed something strange before and asks whom Rebecca usually talks to. Rebecca explains that it is his support voice that guides and teaches him many things. Claudio is shocked and asks if he possesses the legendary tutorial skill. Rebecca confirms, surprised. Claudio also asks if he has the title of Castaway from Another World. Rebecca finds it strange and asks how he knows. From this, Cloud admits that he doesn't know many details but has heard rumors about people coming from another world and begins to suspect that Hibiki might be one of them. Meanwhile, Lillian is completely lost in the conversation, not understanding anything that is happening. Cloud then simplifies, saying that Hibiki came from very far away to save them, and that, for now, that is enough for her to understand. Hibiki asks if there is a problem with him being from another world, but Cloud responds that it doesn't change anything because his loyalty remains unwavering. He still comments, impressed, that Hibiki possesses the legendary skill Tutorial. Hibiki, on the other hand, wonders if this skill is really that special. At that moment, we see the god of Vino himself, completely exhausted after using a third of his power just to create the Tutorial skill. Later, while walking, Claude comments that the god Hibiki is connected to is probably Zuxin. He explains that there are 11 gods in that world, and that Zuxin is the highest level one, known for granting skills like Tutorial and Wise Eyes. Hibiki is impressed to learn this. Claudia also comments that it seems this god has a great interest in him. However, Hibiki believes that the divine interest is more directed towards Cloud and Lillian, especially because of the skill Divine Devastation. Cloud says that he has never heard of this skill and asks what IT means. William is also confused, not knowing if he really has something like that. Hibiki then explains that it is an extremely powerful but self-destructive skill, an immense magical power that can end up consuming the user themselves. Hearing this, Lillian feels devastated. Claudia adds, saying that it was precisely because of this power that Lillian ended up being rejected by her family and used as a way to pay off a debt. Hibiki, indignant, asks if she did something to deserve this, as he does not believe that Zuxin would grant such a cruel skill. Claudia then clarifies that this is not a blessing from Zuxin, but from the goddess Majin, the entity responsible for the arcane arts. Then we see the goddess Majin beside Zuxin. She begins to communicate directly with Hibiki, explaining that the girl is truly suffering because of the ability she received. However, once granted, these abilities are extremely difficult to remove, even by the gods. Despite this, Majin says there is a solution. Thanks to Hibiki's Grimorio ability, she can adjust Lillian's MP and magical power values, reducing the risk of self-destruction. However, she makes it clear that this does not mean she will always help them. Meanwhile, the scene shows Zuxin fallen on the ground, begging for forgiveness. He says he has reflected on his mistakes and deeply regrets them, but Jim, showing no mercy, calls another goddess and asks them to bring the Iron Maiden. Upon hearing this, Zuxin enters complete despair, pleading for her not to do that. Back in the physical world, Claudia asks what the goddess Maiden said. Rebecca merely responds that everything will be fine with Lillian. Claudia comments that Maiden seems to be a very merciful goddess, but in reality, what Rebecca sees in her mind is quite different. The Magian is literally torturing Zuxin. At that moment, the support voice informs that the abilities Sage's Eyes in tutorial have been deactivated. Surprised, Hibiki asks why. The voice explains that the destiny control function of the tutorial ability has been turned off and that from now on, it can only provide basic support with some information. Bibi begins to worry, wondering if Suxin is okay. At the same time, she has the feeling that she has seen that goddess somewhere before. Shortly after, she activates the Grimorio ability. At that instant, a cat appears beside Lillian. Confused, Rabike asks who he is. The cat introduces himself as Vinny, saying he was sent by the goddess Made-In. He explains that the Grimorio was created by her, and that as a sacred beast, he will assist Hibiki. From there on, the scene changes again to Amelia and Ever in the servant in the hot springs. While Amelia and Ever relax peacefully in the water, the servant remains, completely focused on the mountains she mentioned earlier, admiring the view with enthusiasm, and that's how the episode comes to an end. If you made it this far, comment goddess